Alright guys, we're going to react to a video. Willie just came out with a new video, so we're going to that over here and react to it. Classic Plus, that's what interests me guys. Classic Plus. YouTube. This right here is my new hardcore rogue bow. I forgot to put self-found on, so he's not self-found. See me out of
With just about 20 years of patches, updates and changes, every single class, new or old, and
yeah. Here we go, here we go. Skip the
there's a lot
ad.
of people out there who are expecting Classic Plus to be the next big release from Blizzard, and a sentiment I hear time and again is that Blizzard need to move away from vertical game design and more towards horizontal. But what exactly does that mean, and could this realistically work in World of Warcraft? Because Classic Plus is not just going to be fresh realm number 22B. If the game is assumed to be persistent and us staying at level 60, how will systems within the game work after 6 months? What about 1 year, 5 years, or even 10 years and beyond? There simply has to be a long-term plan for World of Warcraft to move away from vertical progression and more towards horizontal. But as for how that can be done, now that's a bit more complicated. Today I'm going to be looking at some ideas about how this can be achieved within World of Warcraft, and what kind of things Classic Plus would need to do in order to essentially break the meta of how people have understood this game should be played for the past 20 years.
Never stop leveling up. That's what I think they should add.
Real quick though, we should just go over the differences between these two design philosophies. Vertical is what World of Warcraft has always been. You level up, your numbers get bigger, you get better gear, and you get higher stats. And as a result, old content becomes trivial and irrelevant. Each new raid tier makes the previous one largely obsolete. To a lesser extent in Classic, but the jump up between raid tiers is pretty enormous. Naxxramas gear, very powerful. It's a constant climb upwards, hence vertical progression. If you take any expansion in WoW's history, you'll start off in your quest greens, you'll get your dungeon blues, and then you get your raid purples. You've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so on. We've all seen the format dozens of times. And by the time you're in endgame gear, well, the stuff from the start of the expansion just doesn't feel that great anymore. Horizontal progression, on the other hand, is about expanding outwards rather than upwards. Instead of making your character objectively more powerful than they were the other week, you're gaining new options, new ways to play, and new problems to solve. Old school RuneScape is really the go-to game here that exemplifies how well this can work. When they release new content, it's not always about pure power increases.
Who can play a game that looks like
it could be
that?
a weapon which is especially good against a certain type of enemy, such as dragons or demons, a specialized tool, or additions to a spellbook, whether that spellbook's for AoE attacks, for utility, or whether it's more just well-rounded. This creates a game where content from years ago remains relevant, and people are still using a gearing ladder in RuneScape of things which came out well over a decade ago. Which brings us to Classic Plus and the opportunity that Blizzard has in their hands here. And I think that Classic Plus has to realize a few things with updates beyond just how do we make things more horizontally minded. First, we really need to unlearn how people have learned to play the game. We've had 20 years of optimization. Players know the fastest leveling routes, the best talent builds, the optimal raid compositions. If Classic Plus is adding more of the same, that will be optimized too, and we'll be back to raid logging within a few months. Second is, it should be understood this will be a long-term project. hopefully, not just a season or something temporary and ephemeral. It should not just be another fresh where you rush to 60, gear up in a predetermined BIS list, and then wait for the next phase whilst raid logging. This needs to be a living, breathing world that continues to evolve and surprise players for years to come. I mean, think about it, if you can hit 60 and be raid logging after 2 months, something has just gone wrong in the game's design. MMOs are meant to be these sprawling menu games that offer multiple different experiences, and Classic has a great menu. It's got dungeons, raids, PvP, professions, exploration, questing, but we've eaten everything on that menu so many times that, as good as it is, a lot of people are getting bored with it. We know everything by heart. Classic Plus needs to expand the menu horizontally.
They should take out the raids completely and just keep leveling. Just the feeling you get between dead mines and stockades and all these dungeons where you're getting blues, getting blues, getting blues, getting blues. Purple should not exist. Not exist until like forever to come, right? They should keep the end game where it is, but push that at like level 200. Make an axe, you have to be level 200. And XP wise, you can't get there for a year, for a whole year. Spread it out. But in that gap from 60 all the way on should just be exploring all new lands and new dungeons, all classic style. Bridge that gap. And then by the time we get there in a year, fill in that new gap and push Nax further. Nax is always the end, but it's always keeps getting pushed a year on. So now you have to get to level 300 to get to Nax. But they fill the middle with everything we want. The exploration, new zones, new dungeons. Raids is brain rot. No one feels important in a raid other than the tanks, right? Really, no. The healer, you have 5 healers. Who feels as an important healer? I've healed so much, and I do not feel important when I'm a healer in a raid.
I mean, things are different nowadays compared to vanilla, where back in the day it would have taken people months to hit 60,
or top DPS.
and it was an entirely different environment. But Classic Plus needs to recreate the sense of wonder that existed back then, but it
And the
can't just do
graphic
so
style
relying
can't
on
change.
player
It has
ignorance.
to
It needs
be
to
brutal
mechanically
graphics like
encourage the
this.
exploration. Third
That's
is that
WoW
World of
Classic,
Warcraft
man.
desperately
Keep it
needs what I
OG.
call new cool. Rewards and goals
Even
that
that's
make
2
players
tiered.
stop and just stare at your character. The old cool is still in the game. You know, you see someone with Thunder Fury or in full tier 2, and that is still pretty amazing. Back in the day, even an epic mount was a status symbol, or things such as a Winter Spring Frost Saber. They all show dedication, but nowadays, we've all seen these things 1,000 times. I'm not saying they're trivial to get still, but they're expected. They're just part of the solved meta. They're not cool anymore. Classic Plus needs new cool, achieved through both solo and group content. Imagine if you saw a hardcore character with some kind of unique set of armor that shows they've soloed every single dungeon in the game, or someone with a title earned from reaching the top rank in some kind of Brawlers Guild style scenario, or a mount that required leveling every class to 60. These aren't just bigger numbers which are vertically progressing your main, they're different achievements that show different types of mastery. So with those 3 things in mind, where can Classic Plus go a bit differently from normal? Well, let's start with the endgame, because right now Classic's endgame is pretty narrow in the scope of content that it covers. Once you're into the endgame, you raid, you PvP for your rank, and then you farm gold on an alt, and that's kind of it, really. And once you have your gear and your PvP rank, what then? You really just wait till the next phase and then just repeat the motions. People will tell you to make another character and do it again, but repetition is not variety.
It's an easy answer,
Plus
man.
must release with at
0
least
to
1
60
or
should be
potentially
0
even
to
2
1,000.
additional endgame avenues that are repeatable and can be built upon in future patches. The journey to 60 is great, it always has been, and I absolutely agree there should be new stuff on that journey too, but players will inevitably reach max level, and they will spend most of their time at max level. So this is the area of the game which, at least initially, I think needs the most attention. So what can we do to the endgame then? Well, as mentioned earlier, World of Warcraft is a game that typically
No
relies
end
on
games.
vertical progression, and vertical progression is often reliant on grouping. Even retail, which is for the most part a solo player friendly game with things such as LFR and Dungeon Finder, eventually hits you with a wall where solo progression has a cap and you're gonna need to start grouping up to get any further. Whereas in Classic, when you hit the endgame, you need other people to do basically anything of value whatsoever. And I think Season of Discovery
That's okay.
actually got something right here by mistake. You see, when they released Molten Core, they designed it for 20 players there, but accidentally you could bring up to 40 when it first came out. So Blizzard ended up noticing this and they fixed it and set the cap back to 20 again. But players then gave feedback and said this flexibility was a good thing. So then Blizzard amended the raid where you could bring between 20 to 40 players. No need for content scaling, just design it for 20 players, and if people want to bring more than 20, then go ahead, you can still do that.
Welcome to Luxury Casino,
one of Ontario's most trusted
online casinos. Now with the highest
Don't.
win rate guarantee.
Whether you like pot collects, Vegas-style games,
Not
or
gamble your
double
money,
slots,
people.
you can choose from our
We've seen it time and again during Classic expansions, that when raiding gets too hard, the player base absolutely falls off a cliff, and I think it's best if we leave it up to players to make their own difficulties within the game, such as via passing or speedrunning, which I'm sure will always be a thing. To go above and beyond that amendment to the raid size, we could take things several steps further. Now, I'm about to say some crazy stuff, but it's in regards to horizontal progression and realistically how we're going to keep these raids alive for a long period of time. So hypothetically, after many new raid tiers have been out, they could drop older raids' flexible requirements down from 20 to 40 players to 5 to 40. At this point, when it's 5 player, you would need to adjust the loot volume and mechanics accordingly, or its loot would replace a lot of the pre-bis phase stuff,
No, man,
and the
stop
mechanics
the
just might be
phase.
overwhelming for 5 people. And when it's on 5 scaling, there should be some classes which are able to solo the old raids. They'd need a lot of gear to do this, it wouldn't be easy, they'd need to invest.
Don't you guys notice that the raids just have to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger? For some reason, the new expansion has to be a deadlier threat. They're missing the magic. The magic is doing Deadmine. The magic is being small in a big world, not being big, conquering a big old god. Like,
Consumables, but it should to some
that shouldn't
extent
even
be
be us.
possible.
The NPCs
and you
in the
could add
game
more to
should
it
be
than
doing
that.
that,
You
not
could tie
us.
special materials to these old raids. Imagine you
We
could
should
get
be
core
small.
forge materials that can only be obtained from
Too many
breaking
people
down
in a
molten
raid,
core
too.
items at the Black Anvil in BRD. Maybe you need a specialized blacksmith to do this, and then these materials are used to craft new items that remain relevant as new content releases. Or what about this? Imagine they considerably reduced the drop rates of epics from Molten Core, but made the gear tradable that dropped from the 5-player mode. As in, if you hit an epic, it's like hitting an epic from a regular dungeon boss. Suddenly, there would be an economy around farming old raids, specialized blacksmiths who can process materials, and crafters who can turn these materials into future gear. This wouldn't just be keeping old content alive, but also making it serve a new purpose. It would be using thematic locations within the world for crafting, creating new profession demands, as well as gold farms. It would be adding to the menu of content that exists within this game, without just simply replacing it. Because the alternative is, for Molten Core for example, is it's just something you do as
Like
a
that
stat raid at the
right
end of
here.
the night because your
That's
main
not
tank
content
still
to
doesn't
me,
have
guys.
Thunder Fury. And even then, how long is Thunder Fury going to be relevant for? Another thing which we're going to have to bring up at some point in this video, so might as well do it now, are in regards to player created services. These are in two main forms, from GDKPs and boosting. The idea behind both these services is they essentially speed up progression through the game's content, and they're symptoms of a larger problem of people wanting to rush through things. GDKPs do fundamentally warp how players approach the game. This system is highly efficient on the surface, people are motivated to put raids together, you join a raid, even if you don't win an item, you get gold in return. I absolutely agree with the positives to it, but there are negatives as well, and I'm not just talking about real world trading or gold buying. The root of the problem here is that so many people only want to raid because it is the only reliable way to increase your character power. And I don't see Blizzard adding GDKPs in back either way, because they haven't added them in SOD or Anniversary Realms, which are the two most recent classic releases. But if we're trying to put more horizontal content in the game, the whole idea of GDKPs being a one-stop shop for the best gearing options and the best gold in the game is entirely antithetical to that. If players can just do one activity and then skip what should be pretty significant parts of the game otherwise, that is going to be a problem, and for me that is the singular largest issue with GDKP. It's simply too efficient and too good. Gear needs to come from more sources, and good gear as well, not just
Did you guys see
optional
that raid?
things.
Like,
I'll talk more
man,
about
that
that in a
isn't
moment.
content.
As for boosting, it's
I'm
also
telling
very
you, man.
problematic as well. It completely bypasses
Raids
the
in
leveling
retail are better
system,
than
which
these
absolutely
frickin'
should be
classic
a core
raids.
part of the game. Again, I understand why people do boosting. You've leveled so many times, it's not an area of the game that you enjoy
But
that
the
much, but at the
dungeon,
same time
classic
you kind
dungeons
of
is where
should
it's
go through
at.
that leveling journey. Again, I think things will be a
Just
bit
deadly
different in
enough to kill
Classic
you.
Plus when it comes to leveling. Also in Classic Plus, you shouldn't feel that pressure of, I need to boost and level my character now, because if I don't do that, then this raid tier is going to be irrelevant and I can't play it anymore. Or if I wait too long, the next expansion will come along and this will all have been for nothing. Breaking up boosting is just another area of the game where people have come to understand that this is the way they should be playing the game, but overall it's just not healthy for the game, and it definitely should not be a part of Classic Plus. And in a world with or without GDKP, to be honest, there needs to be more ways to get gear and to care about gearing your character. Just for a moment, think to the previous phase of Classic. It is really good. Gear comes from everywhere. You've got crafting for your Devil
Yeah.
Sauron Lionheart, you've got dungeons for Mask of the Unforgiven, Hand of Justice, you've got world drops for Maiden Circle or Edge Masters, you've got quest rewards on top of that for Blade Fist's Breath or Mirror's Song. And then what happens is raids happen. In Molten Core, the majority of those items are replaced, and by Blackwing Lair, there are very few that you care about anymore. And this is absolutely compounded in AQ40 and Naxxramas, where the jumps up in gear are just way too large. Classic Plus needs to maintain that diversity of loot sources throughout its lifespan. You've got crafted items that should remain
It should be
competitive,
build
dungeon
oriented,
drops that fill
but
specific
same
niches,
roughly
quest
level
rewards
and
that are added with
stats.
major updates, and perhaps the odd world drop. I don't know, adding world drops to Abyss is probably a bit toxic because it's just going to be people throwing gold at them, but still having some good ones is always exciting. And I think when you have more ways to get gear which are both friendly to solo players and group players, the effect of not having GDKP and breaking up the meta of raiding being all there is to care about.
Raids were awesome when they first came out, but they ruined the game. You need to increase the level and add in all more dungeons.
Be less impactful. Another key way that
Make the end
practically
game
every single
impossible to get
MMO
to.
addresses horizontal content is collection and achievements, and this just seems like an absolute no-brainer to include within the game, to be honest. And these things both do exist to some extent, they're just kind of not
The
officially
whole world would be
recognized within
playing
the
if
game. For example, you
if
could
they
have a
added level
dungeon journal
60
which you
to
gradually fill
level
out as kind of
1000.
a
It's classic
semi-replacement
content.
to
It's easy to
transmog.
create.
The idea would be when you see an
Low
item drop within a
graphics.
dungeon or raid, it would appear as grey within the journal, and if you've collected it, it would show up as in white. I know this is nowhere near as thorough as what transmog is, but it would just be some kind of collection green bar for people to fill up. And if there is a green bar, people will fill it up. You could have achievements for completing dungeons solo without leaving the instance, hardcore based achievements for reaching level caps on different classes without having died, achievements for completing certain content with specific restrictions, such as, I don't know, no talents, no gear from certain sources, only using specific spell schools, and so on.
He's absolutely wrong about that. The players trying to create new challenges for themselves to make the game interesting is not what they should put in the game. What they need is more game. People need more game from 60 on, not raids, not 10 more levels and raids and those dungeons. No, more quests, new zones, increasingly harder to level up. It just so much more content.
Rewards don't have to be power increases either. In fact, they absolutely shouldn't be. And I think cosmetic rewards can work without transmog, because if you have
Like, I don't know how they don't understand when they look at their map and the new players looking at their map and they have all these different zones and they're like, oh, I can't go in that zone. That's level 50. And they're right. And you're looking at all your different zones. That has to continue. right? But then keep on going and going. And new continents. They could even release the same continents they already have. But now, oh, level 200, I can't get there. I have to quest where I am, right? And just keeps on going. Put the whole game in, but do not make it easy. Make it hard, just like Classic. Like, it is hard to die on retail.
Kind of item that you want to flex, you have to go to the trouble of getting that item out of your bank before you can display it. People already stand around in the middle of store
Let
with
me
the
know if you think
Rorgrimmar
I'm
bank
wrong,
with
but
their ZG Tiger and Thunder Fury in tier 3. Are you telling me people wouldn't stand around in some kind of achievement specific reward that showed off they've done something cool? Of course they would. The thing is though, these items just shouldn't be functional in combat and should be for the flex, for people to see and, as I mentioned before, say wow, that's cool, that's something I want to get as well. You could possibly also have some form of mount customizations, different armor sets on.
But that's where they went wrong. Exactly what he's saying. Getting these mounts for doing special things, sure. But that it was naturally founded. People didn't, oh wow, they didn't design them on that basis. Because when they started designing mounts and everything on that basis, that's how you get retail WoW.
Mounts,
You want to make these things unachievable, not, oh, you do this list and then get it. It's like, no, like unachievable. Like you reached a level 1,000 in classic WoW, right? The levels, even if your stats don't go up, the XP bar should keep going up. It should just never end.
those kind of things as well. Next thing I want to bring up for horizontal progression is something which I'm pretty sure is not going to be popular.
People would love to see. People would love to see. I'm level 2,000. Yeah, their power may be capped at 60, but their XP kept going and going, but the content kept going too, and it just little level ups here and there from going to 80 to level 100 zone, level 200 zone, right? Little levels up all the way through.
But player housing. We all know player housing was a feature that was planned to exist in vanilla World of Warcraft. They just did not get around to finishing it,
It'd
and
be
now
better in
finally it's
Classic
coming
too.
into the game in Midnight. And what people do when I say player housing is they think garrisons were bad because people never left them. Garrisons weren't housing, they were just some kind of weird abomination that went terribly wrong. I think housing could work with a focus very specifically on personal storage as well as achievement display. A place to store toys, display old tier sets, show off rare items, let players build and design within reasonable limits. And that would be the key here. You don't really have many reasons to be in your house unless you're getting something out of storage or setting up some kind of achievement that you've just earned. No profession benefits, no daily quests, no mandatory gameplay loops, no auction house, no mailbox. You would have so many reasons to still leave your house, such as trading, enchanting from other players, auction house, traveling around the world, picking up world buffs, and so on and so forth. Essentially make it largely like old school RuneScape's housing is, where it is to a large extent about collection and achievements. You could even add in a new profession alongside this, carpentry, whereas
I've said this a lot about other games too, is they should have like a statue of the best player in the realm, third, second, and first. That's what they should have, the highest level
you
in the
gradually
realm,
build new things. I think this would be thematic, it would make sense within the
not
world, and it would
housing.
give
No
players some
one's
kind
gonna
of
go to your
additional
house.
way to build up their main character, which is very in theme
Maybe a
with
guild
Classic.
house.
And when I'm talking about these updates which are
Have
horizontal
10
content
major
focused, there is
guilds,
something else I
top
need to
10
bring up
guilds
here.
in the realm.
Horizontal design almost always leans towards solo play that can be flexed into group play rather than forced group play. The leading MMOs right now are driving solo content more so than group content, and I think to some extent Classic Plus has to acknowledge this reality, because multiplayer doesn't mean requiring groups for everything. The game is multiplayer by virtue of being persistent and online. Look, if old school RuneScape was an offline game, do you think it would have anywhere near the player base that it does? Of course it wouldn't. It works entirely because of the other people in that world. They are, to some extent, the content within the game. They make it feel alive. You can see what other people have achieved or learn from them in various ways. Classic already has group content thoroughly covered, from dungeons, raids, battlegrounds, and so on. Horizontal progression by its very nature more often than not is solo player friendly, and I think this is going to go for Classic Plus as well. Now, one concern that I'm sure you have about solo content is that it's going to affect the social aspect of Classic WoW, but consider the options. Solo players still need an economy, they still want to show off their achievements, they still want to participate in the world. It's just that quite often they can't commit to raiding at a certain hour every single week anymore, or sometimes they need to leave their PC, or they've just got an hour to play every so often. Look, we both know what the age demographic of games like Classic WoW is, and it's often people who are very much shorter on time than they were when they first started playing. So what kind of solo content would fit within this game? Or not just necessarily solo, but things that could be solo or group? Well, I think one of the best additions World of Warcraft has ever made was the Brawlers Guild. I think this would fit in any version of WoW ever. One-on-one battles against increasingly difficult bosses. No help, no outside group to carry you, just your own skill expression. And then you can add in hardcore achievements to it. Imagine watching a hardcore character take on some of the most difficult Brawler Guild bosses. No Petri flasks allowed, of course, just that person against the boss. It would be crazy good content to watch. The rewards could also be cosmetic focused but prestigious, maybe new armor sets that show you've conquered the Brawlers Guild, potentially titles that mean something, maybe even mounts as well. But if possible, every system should have additional content within this same vein. Professions could have solo challenges, such as crafting items under specific conditions, gathering materials from dangerous or instanced areas alone, and in any event, professions, in my opinion, desperately need to be more than I'm going to look up what gives me the best DPS gain, make 200 vendor items in a row, then forget about it forever. As it stands at the moment, they're just not very good. I think hardcore and the Classic community's real work towards making that mode a reality has also proven what individual players can do and just how impactful they can feel within the world. And I'm sure Classic Plus will have hardcore modes as well, but I hope they can expand on what's already been done and bring in certain achievements or additional rewards as well. The economy is another great way to stimulate horizontal content within the game as well.
The game should be hardcore from baseline. That's how you make a good game. That's how you make a good game. Your character dies, you're dead. That should be baseline. That's what these people want, man. All these people can go, everyone that doesn't want hardcore should just go play retail. Because Classic Plus should be hardcore to a certain extent. You hit 60, now when you die, you lose. Maybe it's gear based, maybe you don't die, but you lose all your progress. That would be crazy. Lose all your gear and have to re-gear.
These systems from old raids,
Or
crafting,
some sort of
housing, solo content, PvP,
some
and
sort
so
of
on
something.
need to work together in the game's economy. Old raids dropping materials for new crafts creates demand for people to
Something
go back
fresh,
and
man.
farm
We need
them.
something
Specialized
good.
processors create a service economy.
Not
Housing would
raids,
create a
man. Raids are
demand
too
for
easy to
decorative
make.
items, storage solutions, and if they tied it to a new profession, everything involved in that as well. There should feel as though there's a variety of ways to go and farm gold and to add to the economy without just having
Look
the
at that guy's
one-stop shop of GDKP. When old content stays relevant, it stays alive for longer, and that's an area where traditionally World of Warcraft doesn't do very well. And I know people will say, well, Molten Core still is relevant in Nax Ramus. Okay, they put a few overpowered items in there like Quick Strike Ring or Onslaught Girdle. You still want your Thunder Fury, but those items will have an exploration date. We're not thinking kind of long term here. We're just thinking mid-term and how the game's already understood to be played. The raid will be irrelevant eventually. Another area which definitely needs talking about is in regards to PvP. So regardless of what happens, the current ranking system and how it's implemented long term just doesn't make sense. The ranking system is unintuitive for new players. You need an add-on to understand what exactly you're getting out of it, and the way way people grind gear creates a meta where people who do not want to PvP flood battlegrounds for the rewards. This leads to very low quality PvP. You're running down AV to maximize honor, you're AFKing in Arathi Basin, and pre-mades are just stomping pugs. This is just bad. The rewards from PvP are so good at higher ranks though that players feel as though they are forced to do it, and this is exacerbated by the scarcity of raid loot and people wanting to get the best gear possible as soon as possible. This creates a very negative feedback loop where battlegrounds are full of players who don't even want to be there, and it's just making the game worse for everyone. I mean, long term, how would ranking work in Classic? Would there just be additional ranks beyond 14? Rank 15? Rank 16? What kind of rewards would they give? How many weeks do I have to run down AV for each of those? Beyond ranking, there's the question of how PvP servers themselves should work. So you may know Blizzard recently consolidated Mr. Pandaria Classic realms because there was no faction balance. There hadn't been since midway through TBC, to be honest. And on top of that, you may remember more recently that Blizzard did a survey, or an alleged survey, where they were asking about the potential of adding War Mode into Classic. However, Tom Ellis from the WoW dev team recently tweeted about forced faction balance in Season of Discovery. He said that this had worked out stupidly well despite it being very simple in what it achieved, and by preventing one faction from dominating, they stopped the slow death spiral that happens time and again. And if you asked me a bit ago, I would have said War Mode would 100% be in Classic Plus, but after having read this, I think we're going to be sticking with PvP servers, but there will be forced faction balance. Either way, just thought I'd mention that too. But if the ranking systems are gone or they're being overhauled, PvP is going to need something in its place, and what it needs is competitive systems to replace it. Look, it's not 2004 anymore. The activity of PvP, the intrinsic PvP, isn't enough to garner a decent player base these days. PvP is entirely centered around competition. So what could they add? Well, again, remembering back to that Blizzard survey, there were 1v1 arenas on that. This will be pure skill expression, no relying on your teammates to carry, no blaming anyone else for your losses, just you versus another player. And there have been a number of 1v1 tournaments run for Classic already over the years. I've watched all of them, and there's often quite a bit of skill expression and depth to PvP already. You could have rated solo queue battlegrounds which could work, but you'd need to limit how many consumables people could spam. Without limits, it would just be gold buyers spamming consumables every few minutes, and the mode would not be popular. You could have Battleground Blitz to offer faster paced content for solo or duo players. Think Battlegrounds but designed to finish in under 15 minutes or less, with modified rule sets to keep the action constant. And for more casual players, Battleground Brawls that could rotate a special rule set throughout regular battlegrounds, such as Fog of War limiting visibility, lower gravity so you could jump about, multiple flags in Warsong Gulch. These wouldn't be rated though, just for fun to keep things fresh, instead of the current battleground rotation. As for traditional arenas, I'm not so convinced about them for Classic Plus. They probably could work, but I think the focus
PvP gear should not be a thing. Everyone should be baseline same strength. And what you work for is the MOG that you get to wear around, right? Like transmog shouldn't be a thing, but the gear you acquire in PvP should be something you can enchant your gear with, so it shows what rank you are on your guy. The fact that there's gear, so you could be fighting a guy that's max level gear and you're just starting PvP. That's just wrong, man. That's just wrong. There should be no gear in PvP.
on new battlegrounds and fixing what we have, rather than copy-pasting this system straight away. There is also the question of rewards for PvP, because you need to give people something. Again, as I mentioned earlier, PvP
that should be just a look.
isn't good enough anymore. Whether these
Right,
are
you
cosmetic
enchant
items
this high
geared
level
tailored
in
towards
PvP,
PvP or both. Now,
but it
it
doesn't
is very
change your
classic
strength
to
in
have a
PvP.
mix of PvP and PvE gear, or to get excited about getting that new two-handed weapon from a raid and going into a battleground and crushing people. But I have a real concern about players min-maxing battlegrounds purely for the rewards and then leaving the content dead because they've achieved what they wanted to. This is what's happened in every single version of Classic where we've with mixed PvP and PvE gear. I don't see why it wouldn't happen again, but the alternative is creating specific PvP gear, which also seems to not be a popular take, so I really don't know what Blizzard want to do here. And of course, with all these proposed changes,
And the
Online
best
is a
looks,
sandbox MMORPG in which
the
you
best
write your
looks
own
should be from
story.
PvP, right? Somebody just looks
horizontal
amazing,
progression, new
but it's
solo
because they
content and
enchanted
so
that
on, it's important
PvE
to
gear
acknowledge that
to
some
look
things have not worked
their
over World of
rank in
Warcraft's history,
PvP.
and to avoid going back into the same problems we've seen before. Mandatory daily quests? No. Borrowed power systems that are reset
No.
frequently? Absolutely not. The level scaling that removes sense of character growth? Of course we're not going to have that either. Making travel across the world instant and convenient. It just really wouldn't fit in the classic world, but we should absolutely learn from the successes wherever they have come from. Not just necessarily retail, but different MMOs too. And it's
You mean
crazy to me for
Delves?
Classic Plus, people will say, if you want Classic with changes, why don't you play retail? What do you think old school RuneScape is? They started doing changes within the first year the game was out. Again, this isn't just going to be another fresh server. This is going to be something which should last for years, and the design of the game has to fit around that. The trick is, if we're bringing something into Classic, it has to fit into Classic in terms of its pacing, its graphics, how it fits into the game lore-wise, and so on. At the end of the day, you're probably thinking I'm going way too out, I'm going to be incredibly disappointed because of all of these expectations and so on. But it's okay to be a customer for something and to ask for more, or what you would like to see. No, of course, I don't expect all of these to be in the game. And above all, the single most important thing for Classic Plus for me, beyond anything else, is that it's a persistent realm. It's not going to release with anywhere near as many features as I would have wanted it to, and I already know that. But that's not going to stop me talking about and discussing things
Yes,
which
the
I would
boat.
like to see in the game, or I think are
They
worth
take away,
talking
like,
about. Some of these systems absolutely wouldn't exist until, well,
I'm calling it right now. They're gonna release Classic Plus. It's gonna be absolute dog shit, and people are gonna come back to vanilla again. That's like that boat right there. The Classic Plus should release, and even at level 1, you create level 1, it says come to this boat, and it takes you to a whole new area. And this boat's a long boat ride, but you're going and you're seeing, even if they change the, right, you go from crappy graphics all the way to a whole new area. It's just a slightly better graphics, and it's Classic Plus, a whole new, you can zone from level 1 in a whole new world. Not no freaking, like, they should, if they release Classic Plus and we're going through Dead Mines again, they failed. Absolutely, they failed. You should be okay. Here's the old zone. You can do Dead Mines in all that area, sure, but this boat takes you to the new. That's what it should be. And that land and the levels just keep going. You could be questing all the way to level 200, and the gear you get at level 70 is better than any gear in Naxxramas, which you can still do at level 60, right? And you just keep going. It just never ends.
the launch. If they try to do everything I've gone over here from day one, it would be an absolute balancing disaster. But it is going to have to grow, it is going to have to be different, and it's going to have to plan long term instead of just going through an expansion every 12 months or so. I mentioned it in a recent video, but Classic Plus needs to think in terms of years, not just
Yup.
phases. There is no expansion coming to roll everything over to. Old school RuneScape is in what many people call its golden age now. It's over a decade old. It lost players initially. It wasn't doing well, but through community feedback and polling and listening to players, it's built itself back up, and it's doing incredibly well. Classic Plus should aim for this same trajectory. Start with a solid foundation, iterate based on feedback, and build something which can truly last for another 20 years. years, and that means being willing to experiment. We've seen experiments already in Season of Discovery. Some of them were well received, other ones not so much. Not everything's going to work, and that's okay, but the important thing is to maintain a dialogue and to really understand what should fit within the classic world, because classic always needs to feel like classic, with the slower paced gameplay, the graphics and art style that we all associate it with, no character services beyond the absolute basics, and keeping in the social elements that made the game special and, importantly, different from other versions of World of Warcraft. Classic Plus has an incredible opportunity. The community is hungry for it, the foundation for the game exists, and there have been so many lessons learned over the 20 years of World of Warcraft's evolution. But it does need to be bold. It can't just be classic with a few extra new dungeons, a raid here and perhaps a zone there. It needs to fundamentally expand on the MMO menu that we
Hundreds
know
of
and
levels.
love from the game.
Hundreds.
Horizontal progression isn't just about adding options, it's about creating a game where players can forge their own path, where content from years ago remains relevant, and where achievements mean something beyond just having the biggest damage numbers. Nostalgia to some extent and just having a very good base game are things which keep people coming back to Classic, but it's not what's going to grow this version of the game into something that it has the potential to
And
be.
no
Classic Plus for me
flying.
must be more than just
I
a fresh
swear no
start. It needs to
flying.
be a game that can last another decade.
I started on retail and I came to Classic and I said, holy crap. Paying for a flight from Ironforge to Stormwind was some of the best content I've ever seen in WoW on my first flight. I was like, oh my god, this is World of Warcraft, not retail. Retail, no.
Evolving and expanding while staying true to what made vanilla World of Warcraft so special. The question really isn't whether Classic Plus should have horizontal progression, the question is how should Blizzard go about implementing it. Anyways, those are just a few thoughts.
I just told you, those two zones, sure, you can play them, but this boat over here, maybe with the third dock, add a third dock onto Darkshore, that takes you to the new world.
Me on that topic and potential ideas which they could explore. What do you think though? Are these the kind of changes you would look for from Classic Plus long term? And how would you make old content remain relevant? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.
That was a great video from Willie. That was fire. He's always got banger videos. He's one of my favorite. What do you guys think, man? Post it in the comments what you think.
Greatest threat.
Look at this
And what a
garbage.
journey for
Hot
someone who
garbage.
started as a spooky voice in a little dagger.
Like, the biggest bad guy, like, they missed the mark, man. And all the people that play retail, come on, guys. Have some fucking human decency.